Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, my dear friends and students. In this video, I am going to talk about the data accumulations, codes, coding structures, and so on. First of all, what is data accumulation? Accumulation simply means collection. The collection of data is called what? Accumulation. As we said, so for the purpose of generating the information, so first of all, we have to collect the data. In order to collect the data in a better way, so of course, we should, in order to process the data properly, step number one, we have to collect the data in a better way. How to collect the data in a better way, how to, for example, generate it or make it available for generation of the information. The first thing that we need while collecting the data is categorizing, or also we can say classifying. When we received or when we collect the data from the several, we can say organizational subunits. So first of all, we should categorize it. For example, whether the data which we collected is from the finance department, whether data is from marketing department, whether data is from this department or that department. And of course, we have to properly encode it as well. It means we should use a proper code that, for example, this code shows that the data is received from this department. And this code shows that, for example, data is received from this department. So one of the way that we can collect the data in a better way and categorize it properly, classify it properly, and summarize it properly is what? Categorizing and encoding of the data. So coding is used in the field of accounting information in order to show the flow of movement of information, that from which department we received information and to which department we have to provide this information. For this purpose, we use some types of codes. Three types of codes we use for data gathering or for data collection. These are the types of codes that we use. One type of code we use is called responsibility codes. Second type of code we use is called account code, and the next type of code that we use is called what? Budget code. So now let us explain each of them one by one. The first one, responsibility code. As you heard basically before, responsibility, while talking about the responsibility center, we said responsibility center means a unit of the organization. So when we say responsibility code is also belong to the unit of the organization. Now let me read it from the slide itself. What is responsibility code? The responsibility codes are the numeric codes assigned by the organization to its organizational subunits. It means responsibility centers. So the codes that we provide for different unit of the organization, that can be called as what? As a responsibility code. For example, code for IT department, code for example, we can say for finance department, code for HR department, code for this one, this one. Code of different countries, for example, also. If each entry is a unit, for example, that can be called as what? This one, right? So these are. Or for example, location code, for example, right? For example, a zip code, we can call it zip code for Kabul, zip code for Mazar, zip code for this one, this one, this one. So all of them can be called as well the responsibility codes. But the main purpose of this one is the subunit of the organization. So each subunit should have their own codes. A simple example is given here, but let me go in a proper way of this explanation. Let us go like this. Suppose this is the structure of the organization. At the top, we have president with the code of 1000. Under president, we have vice presidents, HR, code 2000, vice president finance, code 3000, vice president manufacturing, code, for example, 4000, vice president marketing, suppose code 5000, code 1000, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. See, it shows this flow that this man is responsible to provide information for this. This is also responsible for this. This is also responsible for this. And this one is also responsible for this one. But see, below the vice president manufacturing, there are several other subparts or subordinates. So what are them? This is one. For example, under manufacturing department, manufacturing vice presidents of manufacturing, you may have several factories. For example, this factory, this factory, this factory, you may have, for example, several types of factories. But all these factories or the code of these factories get start from this one. For example, 4001, 4002, 200, 4300, 400, 500, up to 4999, for example. Then when it goes for the 4999, it is there. Above that, it becomes 5000, then it go for the other vice president, which is vice president of marketing. Then under each factory, you may have several production departments. For example, code of this factory is 4100, right? So code of the production can be 4110, 4120, 4100 this much, 400, 4130 up to 4199. Then when it becomes 4200, it go for the other factory, right? Under this one, for example, it get a start, for example, from this one, 4220, 30, 40, 50, 60, 90, up to, for example, the next factory, right? So what is the point here? These two production departments are responsible for this one. These two production departments are responsible for this one. Both of these factories are responsible for this one. All of these are responsible for this one. So top-down information flow come in this way, from president to this one, to this one, to this one, then to this one, and to this one. But bottom-up information flow go in this way. So coding basically shows the movement of information in the business and way of gathering data as well. How we can gather data from the organization, right? So this was one of the example that through the codes we can find out the data is received from where, the expenses incurred for which department, or the information comes from which source. So this was regarding responsibility code. After responsibility code, we have account code. Account code simply means the code which is given for different accounts. For example, in chart of account of a particular organization, code for cash is this much, for account receivable is this much, for land is this much, for this one is this much. Different codes are provided for different accounts. It's not a complicated one. Let me take another example. Example of QuickBook, for example. In the QuickBook, for example, code 60100 is given for this one. These are the subtype of that one and comes under that. Code of 60300 for bad debt. Code of, for example, 60600 for bank service and so on. So for each type of account, there is a code which is given for this one. And this is basically for the purpose of identification of the accounts. That this account is belong to which one, right? So this is one of the code, just simplify the process of gathering information. The last type of code is basically budget code. What is budget code? A budget code is a code which represents the budget amount allocated for different activities in the organization. Yes. For computer equipment, there is a budget code. For advertisement, there is a budget code. For salary, there is a budget code. For stationery, there is a budget code. Even in the case of non-profit organization, donors, when they request, for example, from donors to provide this much fund for us, so for that one, first of all, they have to make a code in which code they should provide. And now in these days, of course, you have heard of code 91 with our presidential palace, how much they receive, for example, in code 91. Let me give a simple example codes. What are different codes? These are basically the codes that we use in our budget. What is mentioned here؟ جدول تو مصارف دولت و تفکیک وزارتخانه و ادارات تا ختم ربع چهارم سال مالی 1398 به میلیون افغانی. These are the codes, for example. Code 1000 is ریاست عمومی دفتر مقام ریاست جمهوری, for example. Code 11 نشان و جرگه شورای ملی. For example, these are the codes which are given for each of them. For example, ریاست عمومی دفتر مقام. How much is the budget? For 19, this was the goal, and this much is expended. So it means this much part of their budget has been expended, right? Mishran Jirga, of course, they have expended around 99% of their expenses. So these are the kinds of codes that are given for different budgets of different organizations, right? Wazarat Umur Kharija, for example, they have spent 98%, right? So which ministry have spent? Radio Television Milli Afghanistan, for example, they have spent this much, right? So these are the kinds of code that we give for different budgets. After code, of course, the next point is coding structure. Coding structure means method of making codes. How we can make codes. The method used to make different code is called what? Coding structure. How to make a code for the organizations can be called the coding structures. There might be several methods of making codes, but I have mentioned only three types of codes. The first type of coding is, for example, coding structure is sequential codes. If we make the codes by sequence, for example, code 120, the next is 121, 123, 22, 23, 24, and so on. And usually these kinds of codes are used, for example, in the case of checks, in the case of sales order, in the case of requisition, in the case of purchase order, in the case of invoice, receiving report, and so on. In the case of all these types of documents, we use which type of code? Sequential code. So sequential codes, when the codes are just given by the sequence, and it's very simple. After sequential codes, of course, the next type of code is called what? Block codes. Block codes are basically the codes which are the combination of several parts and show two or three activities. For example, this is one of the example. Suppose this part shows that, for example, the code is belong to which department. And this is the code is belong to expenses. Suppose this is the code of, for example, salary. This is the code of salary, and this is belong to finance department, and this code shows that how much is the amount of salary. So block code basically shows three or four activities. How much is the salary? Which kinds of expenses? For example, salary expenses. How much is the amount of salary, and this is for which department? So leave those examples. Let me give a simple example of your ID card. For example, you are in Carleton University, and this is your ID card. This also can be called as a block code. Number one, 301 and 302. Basically, this is for economic, for BBA department. 301 means you are in the morning, and 302 means you're in the evening. So let me go for this one. 301, you are in the morning student. You have joined in 2017. You have joined in spring, and your ID card is what? 91. So this is basically your ID. Through ID, we can find out the student joined in which semester. Let's go for this ID. 302, you are the evening student. You joined in 2019. You joined in fall. Basically, this 4 is for spring and this 9 is for fall. You joined in fall 2019 and your class ID is 21, right? So this can be called, or this can be considered as example of block codes. And the last type of code is called what? Mnemonic codes. Mnemonic codes are those codes which are the combination of letters and numbers, and they are used as an abbreviation to remember something. For example, in A and B is mentioned instead of A and B for richer company. If A and B is mentioned for you, you may remember something, for example, right? So if any abbreviation remind you something, that can be called as what? As a mnemonic code. Mnemonic code means something which remind you something else. For example, when you look, for example, for M, so it may remind you, for example, about Mohab. It may remind you, for example, about, for example, your friend, right? So this can be called as what? As a mnemonic code. So the next is the accounting cycle. We'll explain in the next. Please don't forget to go for our channel in YouTube and find the rest of the videos.